Hi, welcome to lesson 2. In this video, you're going to learn how to build your app's user interface. And that's just the technical term for the screen that the user sees. You'll learn about auto layout that's used to position and size elements. By the end of this video, you'll have built this user interface. As you can see, you're going to learn how to add images, text, and how to position them. More importantly, you're going to be doing it with auto layout constraints. And you're going to learn how to do it in a way that's going to make it work for all screen sizes. So we're just going to start a brand new Xcode project just like we did in the previous lesson. Make sure you're looking under this iOS tab and that you've got single view app selected. Let's click next. And then in the product name, I'm going to say app2, and the rest of the properties should already be filled out from the project you created from the last lesson. We don't need to change any of that. Let's click next. And then we are just going to save it on the desktop. We're going to jump right into the main.storyboard here because we're going to start customizing our view. In the lower right hand corner, do you remember what this is called? This is the library pane. And we're going to be looking at this tab, the object library. This is where we are going to be able to select some elements to add into our view. So in this filter text box, I'm going to type in image view because this is the element we're going to use to display images in our screen. So let's click and drag and then drop that into our view. Unfortunately, right now we don't have any images to show in that image view. We have to actually add those images into our Xcode project. So if you look in the file navigator here on the left hand side, right underneath the main.storyboard, you'll see this assets.xc assets. If you click that, it's going to bring you to a section where we store the images that we use for our project. As expected, there's nothing right here, and in fact there's even an entry for the app icon, but there are no image assets here. So what we're going to want to do is add some images in here for us to use. And if you check the description below this video, I've got a link to the image that we're going to use in this project. It's called lesson2assets.zip. So just click that link right now, download that zip file, and put it on your desktop. And then I want you to go ahead and unzip that file. I'm going to double click this zip file and it's going to unpack it, and out pops an image. This is the image we're going to use. So all you have to do is click this image and drag it into your Xcode project, and you should have highlighted the assets.xc assets so you can drag it directly into this asset library. You can either put it in this panel or this panel, it really doesn't matter. But when you let go of your mouse button, you're going to have this image in your Xcode project now. What we're going to want to do is actually rename this asset, and I'm going to click it and wait about a second. It's going to open up a text box for us to rename it. I'm going to put landscape in there. Alternatively, you can actually highlight it and just hit enter on your keyboard, and that allows you to rename it as well. So right now you should be looking at your assets.xc assets. You should have this landscape entry and you should see this image here. Let's go back to main.storyboard, and now in this image view, just highlight it in the document outline, and right here in the inspector pane, we're looking at the attributes inspector. At the very top, there is this image property. Pull the drop down, and you're going to see that image asset which we added. So just click that, and then immediately you're going to see your image view display that image. Now we're going to want this guy to be full screen. So we're going to need to set some constraints for this UI image view. But first, I want to show you something called the safe area in this document outline. If you go ahead and click that, you're going to see a portion of your view highlighted in blue. And this is what is known as the safe area. You can see this little bar at the top in white. That's not part of the safe area. And the safe area is just a space where you can be guaranteed that the stuff you add won't be obstructed. So as you can tell up here, this is where the status bar for the phone is. Right, you see your time, you see the carrier, you see a bunch of icons and stuff like that. So it's just warning you, if you highlight the safe area, that the area highlighted in blue is an area where your elements won't get obstructed. Now that doesn't mean that you can't put anything up here. I mean, we can go ahead and stretch that image all the way to the very top. We just have to understand that there may be some text overlaying that. like the carrier, the time, the symbols, and such. So this is going to come into play because when we add auto layout constraints, we can specify, do we want that constraint? Like for instance, if we're specifying a top margin for this element, do we want that to be 0 from the safe area, or do we want it to be 0 from the very edge of the screen? Right, so I'm going to show you that right now. We're going to highlight the UI image view, and then we're going to go down here to the bottom right, and we're going to click this Add New Constraints button. And this menu pops up. It's going to allow us to add some margin constraints for our UI image view. You can see 4 text boxes here, 1 on each side, and each of these text boxes represents the margin that we want to set for that UI image view. Right here, there are some default numbers, and these numbers are just the current values if we wanted to have the UI image view look like this. So you can see 235 here. Right now, this length right here is 235. So we're going to go ahead and change this to 0. Oh, and I should mention that the values you see here will be different because when you drag that UI image view into the view, you'll probably have dropped it in a different place than I have. So where I dropped it into the view, these are the current margins. So I've set this one to 0. You can see that this constraint is active, or I'm about to add it because this red line is highlighted. Now the other 3 margin lines are blanked out. And down here you can see add 1 constraint. If I change the number, it kind of automatically activates that constraint. And you can see down here it says add 2 constraints now. If I click this button right now, it's going to add this top constraint and this left constraint. Now I can actually click that and turn it on or off. Right now I'm not adding any constraints, and right now I'm adding 2 constraints. Another thing I want to mention is this little triangle here. These aren't actually text boxes, they're actually drop downs. So if I click this, you're going to see the safe area and the view. This is what I was mentioning before. Do we want it to be 0 margin from the safe area or from the view? So I'm actually going to change this to the view like that. And be careful because it changes back to 235 when I select that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit 0 again. So even for these ones, I'm going to change it from safe area to the view to make sure it's actually to the very edge of the screen. This one, again, change it to the view. And this one down here, I'm going to change it to the view. And then I'm going to set all of these to 0. So a fast way to jump through the different text boxes is if you just press Tab, like that. And then lastly, we're going to uncheck constraint to margins because we want it to be to the very edge and not towards some margin. And then down here, it should say add 4 constraints. So click that, and immediately you're going to see the UI image view stretch to all 4 edges. Now it doesn't go all the way to the top. I'm going to double check what we added there. If you look in the document outline, you'll see that now you have this entry called constraints. If we expand that, you can see the 4 constraints which we added. And clicking each of them, you can look in the inspector pane on the right hand side and you can look at some configurable properties for it. So let's take a look at the top one, landscape top equals. So somehow, even though I set it to the view, somehow it's changed itself back to the safe area. So what we can do, actually before I do that, let me explain to you what this means. So this constraint is saying to make the landscape is our image view. Right, the top edge of our image view equal to the top edge of the safe area, right? And 0, this is what we specified, but I don't want it to be 0 from the safe area. I actually want it to be 0 from the view up here. So I'm going to pull this drop down, and I'm going to choose super view. And super view is just a term to describe the view that contains our UI image view. So let's click on super view, and then you can see that this constant has changed to 20. And you can see that there is this bar here, this constraint, this indicating that my UI image view is now 20 from the super view.top. Well, I'm going to change that back to 0, hit enter, and now you can see that it's actually 0 from the very, very top instead of the safe area. So I've just showed you that you can click on a constraint and you can edit it from this inspector panel. Now I want to show you that you can actually just remove them. So if you make a mistake, go ahead into this document outline right here. You can hold down Command or Shift, and you can click each of them like this, and then just go ahead and hit delete on your keyboard. If we do that, this image view, it looks like it's positioned correctly, but in reality, there are no constraints dictating how it should be positioned or sized. So that's going to be a problem. We've just deleted all of our constraints. As extra practice, we're going to just re-add them. So let's click on the landscape right here, this UI image view that is now named landscape, and then go down here to the bottom right and go to add new constraints, and we're going to do this again. So first of all, it looks like this one is safe area, so I'm going to choose view. This one is safe area, I'm going to select view instead. This one I'm going to select view. This one is view, okay. And let's double check that it hasn't changed on me again. And let's click add 4 constraints. So there we go. We have 4 again. All right, the next thing is that this image actually looks kind of stretched and it looks distorted, right? If we highlight the image view here and go into the inspector panel, there is a property called content mode, and this dictates how the image should be stretched or if it should not be stretched. Right now it's set to scale to fill, which means it's just going to stretch it however it needs to in order to fill up the whole image view. For instance, we can set it to just center, and it's just not going to stretch it, and there's actually a lot of overlap that you can't see right now. Or we can set it to aspect fit. It's just going to try and fit the entire image without stretching it. Or we can set it to aspect fill. It's going to enlarge it so that it fills the entire image view, but it's not going to distort it because it's going to maintain the same height and width ratio so that it won't look squished or stretched or anything like that. So that's the one we're going to choose. So then we get something that looks like this. All right, now we have to add our labels, but we can't just add our labels here because that text is going to be pretty hard to read. So we're going to create a little bit of a black background here so that we can put our labels on top of it, and then it'll be easier to read. So down here in the object library, let's change this filter text. Instead of image view, let's type in UI view. When you do that, you're going to see this element here that says view. So this is kind of like a generic view that we can color and we can put things in. We're going to go ahead and click that and drag that onto our screen just like that. And having it highlighted in this document outline, I'm going to go over to the inspector pane. We're going to change the background color. So go ahead, hit this drop down and choose black color. And then you're going to click this little black rectangle here. That's going to bring up this little menu with a couple of tabs. If you choose this tab here, it's going to be all black, but you can slide this opacity and you can make it semi-opaque like that. And I'm going to set it to about 80%. You can also just type it into this text box here. And then we're going to go ahead and click that red X to close it. And you can see that we have this beautiful sort of semi-transparent black, which we're going to put our labels on top of. But first, let's position this UI view. So having it highlighted in our document outline, I'm going to go over here and click add new constraints. I'm going to just off the bat uncheck constraint to margins, and I'm going to go ahead and enable the left, the right, and the bottom constraints, and then I'm going to choose view instead of safe area like that, and change that. And then I'm going to set these to 0. Notice that I'm not touching this top constraint, and I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to do 0, I'm going to do 0, I'm going to do 0. Let me just double check that it hasn't changed back to the safe area. All right, and we're going to click add 3 constraints this time. All right, so you're going to see a couple of things here. First of all, it's stretched to the left and right because we added those constraints, but now there's this red line here, and it's supposed to stick to the bottom because we said it should be 0 from the bottom, but there's this red line here. And over on the document outline, you can see this little red arrow here. If we click that, you're going to see that there are some auto layout errors. Right here, it says that it's missing some constraints. It can't determine the Y position or the height. So before our bottom constraint is going to take effect, we're going to need to set either a height for this view or a top constraint so that auto layout system has all the information it needs to be able to position that UI view. So what we're going to do is highlight this view while holding down the command key. Click on this root view as well. This is kind of like the overall view that contains everything. So okay, let me try that again. So highlight this view, hold down command, and then click this root view. So you should have both of these highlighted in blue now. Now with that, I want to go down here, add new constraints again, and I want you to choose equal heights. And that is going to basically make this black dimmed view the same height as the root view, which basically is this entire view right here. But we're going to do a little something special in order to make it dynamic. So you're going to see that in a second. But for now, make sure you have equal heights checked on and then click add one constraint. Then you're going to see basically the whole thing dimmed out, and then a couple more constraints added in this constraints menu. You can see that it's starting to get pretty confusing. I can't really tell unless I really try to read it. I can't really tell which constraints have to do with the landscape and which constraints have to do with this view, right? So one easy way to tell, if I only care about the constraints for this UI view, for instance, let's highlight it in the document outline here, and then I'm going to go into the size inspector tab. And if I scroll down, it actually shows me that there are 4 constraints that relate to this element. And like this, I can easily tell which constraints that I want to modify. So I actually want to modify this one, equal height, to super view. I'm going to double click it. Well, it's automatically going to highlight the constraint that I selected, and then it's going to show me its configurable properties here on the inspector pane. So let me read this constraint to you. The view's height should be equal to the super view's height. So this is the view, and this is the super view. Remember, super view is just a fancy word for the view that contains that element. So you can see that if I collapse this view, everything is inside of it, right? So this view actually contains everything inside of it. All right, so if you have this reversed, if you have superView.height is equal to view.height, I want you to go down here and click on reverse first and second item. If I click that, you're going to see superView height equal view height. I don't want that. I want you to click this, reverse first and second item. The first item should be view height because that's what you're trying to specify. So our rule states that the view's height should be equal to the super view's height. And down here, there's a multiplier. I want to change this to 0.3. When I do that, that's saying that the view's height should be equal to 0.3 times the super view's height. And this is going to set the height so that it's about a third or about 30% of the entire height. And this is going to be dynamic. It doesn't matter how tall the root view is, it's always going to be 30% of that height. All right, now in the bottom right hand corner, let's change this UI view filter text. Let's type in label because we're about to add some labels, and let's click and let's drag this into this black area, this UI view. When you do that, you can see that my label is actually inside of this UI view now, because this UI view is actually a container view. It can contain other elements. And now that my label is inside that view, when I specify my auto layout constraints, let's say I want it to be 0 from the top, it's going to be 0 from the top of this UI view. It's not going to be 0 from the top of this root view, right? Because you're always specifying the positioning constraints relative to the parent that contains it, right? So since this view contains my label, if I position my label 0 from the top, it's going to be based on the top of this view, which is fine. That's exactly what I want. So let's highlight this label in the document outline. Let's go into the attributes inspector here. First of all, let's change the color so we can actually read it. We're going to choose white color, and let's change the label to city by the sea. And don't worry that it's kind of cut off right now. We're going to address that. And then I'm going to click this little icon here so we can change it to a bold type of font, and I'm just going to up the size to something like 24. And then we're going to specify some auto layout constraints for this guy. So with this label highlighted, I'm going to go down here to add constraints, and we are going to, let's do those constraints, the top, the left, and the right. So for the top, I'm going to say 20. From the left, I'm going to say 20. And from the right, I'm going to say 20 as well. And then we're going to click Add 3 Constraints. And then you're going to see something like this. We're going to add a little description label below that. So let's click this label and let's pop it into there as well. And now you can see in this document outline that my view contains 2 labels. So highlight this second label. Let's configure some properties. Let's change it to white. Let's change the font. We'll leave it at 17. And we're going to set some constraints for this guy. So make sure it's highlighted here. And then click on Add New Constraints down here. And this time we are going to, again, we're going to do that. But if you pull this drop down, you're going to see that you can position it relative to the label that's directly above it. So we're going to choose that. We're not going to choose the view. So position it relative to the element that's right above it. And I'm going to say that it should be 10 points below that title label. The left will be 20 and the right will be 20 as well. And then I'm going to add these 3 constraints. You're going to see something like that. Now I'm going to go back to these properties. There are a couple things I forgot to set. For example, I want to type a sentence. So this is such a beautiful place. And if we wanted to make it multi-line, all we have to do down here is change that lines by default it's 1. Let's change it to 0. And if I typed more text, it's going to be multi-line, but I'm going to leave it like that for now. Now that we've created this beautiful layout, we're going to preview it in different screen sizes and orientations. And the way we do that, you might have noticed down here, it says View as iPhone 8. If I click this, I bring it up, you can actually see a whole bunch of different screen sizes and orientations. So the one I'm looking at right now is iPhone 8, but you can go up. So let's say, click this. This is the iPhone X. Sometimes, if you don't see this entire view, or if it's blocked out, or maybe the screen is all white, try zooming in and then zooming out to force that view to kind of refresh and redraw itself. Now let's go up again. This is the iPhone 8 Plus. So you see here I have a white screen. I'm just going to click and zoom in. So you see now it's just redrawn. If you don't have these controls here, it may be that you're maybe on a laptop screen and you can't see this. You need to make a little more space. Click this document outline button to just hide the document outline, and you'll probably get your zoom buttons down here. All right, so let's go downwards now. So we were looking at the iPhone 8. That's where we started. Let's go downwards. This is the iPhone SE, and this is the iPhone 4S. Now we're going to change the orientation. We're going to click on landscape here. So you can see that everything's adapted itself because all of our constraints are dynamic. And you can see that this still takes up 30% of the height of the screen. We're going to go upwards. This is the iPhone SE, iPhone 8, the iPhone 10, and again, part of it is cropped. Let's go like that. So you can see that here it's kind of a little bit almost touching our text label here. Now, if we had specified that the left side of the UI image view and the UI view should be relative to the safe area and not to the very edge, then we wouldn't have come into this notch area. Actually, this part right here, this part's considered a safe area. Let me see if I click on safe area right here, you can see a blue outline. You can see that this left edge of the screen, this is not in the safe area. And you can see that this part is not in the safe area. And also this part down here is not in the safe area. Since we kind of ignored the safe area and we specified our elements to the very edges, that's why this text is so close to here. In order to fix this, we might just increase the margin on the left side or something like that. All right, let's move on. Let's go to the next device. We've got the 8 Plus again. I have this white screen. Let's zoom out, zoom in. So there you go. Now, one thing I ought to mention is that this area down here lets you preview your layout in multiple screen sizes or orientations, but it also allows you to add constraints that are specific to a certain screen size. And the way you do that is this button here, vary for constraints. If you accidentally click this, and then let's say you clicked something like that, and then this area became blue, then you're actually, at this point, you're going to be adding constraints that are specific to this right here. And you're not actually specifying constraints to be specific to a screen size, but there's something called size classes, which each size class actually contains a bunch of different screen sizes. It's like a category of screen sizes. This is something that we'll cover down the line. I want to warn you about it right now, just in case this area looks blue for you. If it does, you have to click on this done varying, and chances are the constraints that you added were specific to whatever screen size you accidentally selected. So I would at this point advise you, after you clicked on done varying, if you had accidentally clicked it before, is to now go ahead and delete all your constraints and kind of redo it and re-add it. But for most of you, if you didn't click this button before and you didn't know about it or you didn't notice it, and it's not blue, chances are you don't have anything to worry about. So now I'm going to run it in the simulator. So I'm going to go ahead and select the iPhone 8 simulator. I'm going to click run. I'm going to see it launch in our simulator. Just like that. And in order to rotate the device, you can go up to hardware. You can go down to rotate left or rotate right. And as you can see, there are shortcut keys. You can hold down command and press the left arrow or right arrow. You can actually even just choose one like this from here, orientation. But I'm going to use the shortcut keys. So on my keyboard, let's press command and left. You can see that it's just rotated. Rotate it back, rotate it the other way now.
So there you have it. Today you learned about auto layout and what the safe area is. You learned how to add, edit, and delete constraints. You also learned how to check your layout under different screen sizes and orientations. Now, how would you like to get some extra practice and build another user interface? I've got a worksheet for you to do just that. Go through it and build this user interface. First, I've got a question for you. For the app that you want to build, are you going to be focused on the iPad screen size or the iPhone screen size? Let me know by leaving a quick comment below. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel by clicking the subscribe button below. And if you don't want to miss a single video, make sure you click that bell icon as well. Lastly, don't forget to grab that worksheet and get some extra practice with auto layout. Just follow the URL on the screen or click on the URL in the description below the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.